Hello, everybody.
Hello, Andy.
All right, nice to see you all again. I hope you're doing well and had a nice holiday weekend and your week's going well so far. We have a full lineup tonight with some guest speakers, starting off with USDA about resources related to urban agriculture, as well as those available for veterans and how you can apply to some of these programs. And then we're going to hear from Seth Wilner with the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. Who's going to sort of dive in a little bit more from last week's session on whole farm planning, but take it sort of the next step in terms of record keeping and sort of continuing on that pathway of creating a business plan. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick check-in and first ask if anyone has any issues with Teachable or any of the logistics that we should make Carlos or Robin aware of. Everyone's able to access their Teachable folders. All right, well, if you do have any questions, you can reach out to them and we'll make sure we put their emails back in the chat. And also before we get started, I just want to make sure we leave a few minutes here for any discussion regarding last week's session, or if you had a chance to look at some of the resources we provided or the worksheets specifically related to whole farm planning. So this is a time for you all to share if anything really resonated with you from last week or what you've sort of come to and working through some of these resources, as well as any questions you have. Feel free to unmute yourselves or throw something in the chat.
I would just like to say that I really appreciate the holistic approach and how you guys are considering the whole family into the farm. My degree was in agriculture and they didn't talk about family. So it's good to see that that it needs to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing, and that's really great to hear, especially with Seth here tonight. Seth is sort of my mentor in holistic management, and been working with him for I think over 10 years now, particularly with our farm. So that's, I have to credit the same sort of process for really helping us on that journey as to where we are today and how we manage towards our goals. So yeah, that's definitely Seth's gonna sort of, like I mentioned, continue on that path tonight. I think, Seth, a lot of it's also relates to a family budget and knowing what we have to make off our farms in order to
Indeed.
manage towards that. Any other thoughts, questions? All right, well, if anything does come to mind, make sure you jot it down. We'll have time hopefully at the end for some more questions. And also a reminder that we had a few folks stop by the happy hour, office hours yesterday from 12 to 1.
We know what Andy was doing.
Good for you, Andy and Seth.
It could be a happy hour. But yeah, we'll have again next week and the week after at the same time. We can resend the Zoom link as well, but you can log in at any time if you have any questions or just want to hang out and chat. You can also reach out to us if you just want to have a one-on-one conversation or receive technical assistance. So at this point, I guess we can start with presentation from the USDA's Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. We have the interim director with us, Rafael Guerrero, as well as Joseph Heller, who is an urban agriculture specialist. And so at this time, I'm just really grateful for both of you being here this evening and sharing all your great knowledge and experience as related a lot to your work within NRCS and USDA. So I think I'll turn it over to Director Guerrero, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Andy, first of all, I want to thank you and NCAT and your folks there for inviting us to this event, and looking forward to the presentation and the discussion, and hopefully continue to build a relationship with NCAT and your office. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Joseph Heller, as I mentioned, is an urban agriculture specialist, and take things away, Joseph.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here for my presentation. So I just want to start off by thanking all military veterans and people on the call involved in providing those services to our country. So I want to thank you and wish everyone safe in that in those positions that you have. So let me just go to share slideshow mode. And I'll just ask for a quick check. Can you see the screen? Excellent. So again, my name is Joseph Heller, and I work with the United States Department of Agriculture, and I'm a conservationist. I've been working for USDA for over 20 years. My territory has always been the Long Island, New York City, and Hudson Valley region of New York. So I've worked with a variety of different types of conventional farms, some livestock, but mostly working with urban and suburban farms, those growing in smaller or confined spaces throughout New York. And then most recently, being hired to work for the Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. So in the United States, motivations for encouraging urban agriculture include not just food security, but also developments of local and regional food systems, reduction of food waste, community prosperity, and cultural experiences. Today, we're focused on programs offered by USDA for urban farmers. Urban agriculture refers to the cultivation, processing, and distribution of ag products in urban settings. Production methods and scale, they vary from subsistence growing to community gardens, small urban farms, to large commercial enterprises, which you probably start seeing pop up like vertical indoor farms and hydroponics and aeroponics operations. Involvement in urban agriculture includes health, nutrition, supporting entrepreneurship, developing local food chains, and green spaces in cities. So urban agriculture can take place in a variety of locations and is often found in smaller spaces. You can find it in backyard gardens, vacant lots, next to highways, on top of and nestled between city buildings, and often right in the middle of suburban housing developments. So urban farming also includes innovations, again, like we mentioned, vertical farms, rooftops, indoor controlled systems. It's really interesting that you can go from a box to a garden in 45 minutes. Of course, you have to wait for the plants to grow. So the United States Department of Agriculture and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which I'll talk a little bit more about, which are really boots on the ground agency, along with the Farm Services Agency, they implement programs designed to mitigate the significant risks associated with farming through conservation programs, technical assistance, so that's one-on-one guidance on how to grow food and production systems in these smaller spaces, and also provide a commodity loan and program and crop insurance services for times of disaster. So all the practices and programs of the NRCS are voluntary, and I'll review some of those as we move forward. So with the COVID-19 lockdown and the threat of global pandemic has turned a lot of people who may have previously not farmed or always relied on stores are now a little bit more open to growing food themselves, so they're not so dependent on supermarkets and other sources of food. They're starting to grow it now in different types of gardens and spaces that we haven't seen before. So new technologies are advancing, and we're starting to see opportunities that are entrepreneurial and to have inclusive communities. So you can see here, there is some youth in education, there's food composting, food waste reduction and composting that returns. It's a cycle of success in agriculture in communities when this type of activity begins to happen. So NRCS, again, as I mentioned, is the boots on the ground agency. It's the voice for USDA to extend information about the vital resources the department can offer, such as conservation programs, as I mentioned, which would include different projects like irrigation efficiencies, as well as taking a look at seasonal extension through high tunnels, and even problems that may be on the farm related to climate issues. Sometimes cities can have excessive wind. There may also be issues associated with pests. So there are a variety of things that we can do to help farmers be successful and have higher yields in their production. So what we first do with NRCS is we have a very extensive conservation planning process, but it really is a guide for how we can assist farmers. And it's an open plan that can be tailored to meet the needs of urban farmers and any farmer actually. But that plan in urban areas can be complex, and oftentimes urban and suburban areas may have large amounts of contamination, often deposited well before a garden is considered. These contaminations may have leached into the soil, in some cases as airborne particles that have been deposited in the soil, such as lead from smelting plants. So ensuring the health should be a priority of the sites. So here you can see there's a handheld device here that these two soil scientists are using, and they were able to tell directly by putting this feature into the soil whether or not there are trace metals there. And then coming up with solutions for that is something that the conservation plan may address. So as we look again to the different types of resource concerns and the planning that we would be doing on the farm, you can see on my left-hand side of the slide here is a section with severe erosion on a farm. And this erosion can happen on small-scale agriculture, large-scale agriculture. But this is one of the things that the NRCS has its foundation in, is providing for soil health. So in this area, which is destroying this field, so production is very low, NRCS could come in and take a look at why this problem is happening and come up with alternatives, different suggestions that the landowner would agree to, because it's all voluntary, to improve that. And then NRCS could follow up with financial assistance to pay for some of the costs associated with resolving this. I think probably the easiest one to explain is the irrigation. So here, Carl, he's farming in this urban area, and he uses overhead irrigation, typically because he has the raised bed, so it's challenging to put a drip irrigation system in. But nonetheless, we're working with Carl on ways to reduce the overconsumption of water that he's experiencing using a tripod irrigation with sprinkler type rather than the drip tape which goes along the soil. Probably one of our most popular practices is the seasonal high tunnel. And I could do a whole presentation just on the high tunnel. But when we evaluate the resource concern for this particular practice, it's looking at extending the growing season. So a lot of times people may come to us and they may have a field of hay, or there may be a turf grass area, and they'll request a high tunnel, but we don't have anything to base extending the season on if there are no crops there. So here you can see an example of these peppers, and these peppers were lost due to cold in the late fall. So had those peppers been growing inside the high tunnel at this time of the year, they would have still been productive and been able to be a saleable crop. Again, just mentioning the practices that are specific to urban agriculture. So NRCS may provide and design technical mitigation strategies tailored to a farmer's specific needs to ensure food is grown in a safe environment, such as assistance for raised beds or the development of an irrigation water management system. So if you see here in the one slide, it's the blue drip tape that's going along the crops here on that left-hand side. I probably have a cursor here someplace that I could use. Well, an NRCS engineer worked with this farmer to ensure that the crops are getting just the right amounts of water, not too much, not too little, and it really efficiently puts the water into place. What's important about that is if you look over to the right here, there's a water tank. And, of course, you don't want to use up all your reserves of rainwater. So efficiently using that water and putting it just on the spot is very important through an irrigation water management plan. And all of these practices here are also commonly used inside of the seasonal high tunnel. And then nutrient management is very important. Nutrients do odd things inside of a controlled environment like this when you're growing in soil. So soil testing is extremely important in those structures. So I know I kind of feel like I'm rushing a little bit, and Andy, make sure you keep me on track on time. The term veteran farmer or rancher is something I think that we get questions on quite often, and it can sometimes be a little bit confusing for veterans, people who have been veterans for many, many years. So the definition is here, and I'm always not the one to read off of slides to people, but here it means a producer who has served in the United States Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, or Coast Guard, including the reserve components thereof, was released from service under conditions other than dishonorable, and has not operated a farm or ranch, or has operated a farm or ranch for not more than 10 years. So whether you haven't operated, or if you are, you're in that beginning farmer and rancher category, which is a 10-year period that can be considered a beginning farmer. And then this section here, if you first obtained status as a veteran during the most recent 10-year period. So I think that's one that can be somewhat confusing for some. For legal entities, so if you're a corporation, a nonprofit organization, or a joint operation, to be considered a veteran farmer or rancher, all members must meet the above definition. Veteran farmers or ranchers may also qualify as socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers by meeting additional criteria. So socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, we do have another category that looks at median household income, as well as the 5 protected classes that USDA supports as being historically underserved. So those are some other categories that a veteran may also fall under as well. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? I don't want to monopolize and just keep rolling through. Do we want to take a question or two, or just keep rolling? I can't hear.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, hi, Rick.
This is Ricky. On your previous slide, you had a requirement for the most recent 10 years. For instance, I retired in 2011. So would that put me out of the scope of the 10-year period, or next year take me out of scope?
First obtained status as a veteran during the most recent 10-year period. So I would imagine that your first year in 2011 would start that time frame till now. I don't know how closely they monitor that to, I'm sorry, to the month you said, because we're in 2021, so you're probably in that 10-year window as we speak.
Okay.
I could clarify that for you.
Okay, and I'm just wondering what happens when you go out of scope. Then do you become, not eligible for, certain programs, or wondering. So I appreciate it.
Yep. So in terms of the eligibility, everybody would be eligible for all these programs. What they've done is they've created these historically underserved categories that includes veterans, that it provides an opportunity to either do an increase in the amount of funding. So historically underserved producers will receive a smaller stipend in the amount that's being paid, say for the high tunnel or the different practices that are paid for. However, there's no competitive advantage. So everybody competes equally for the funds. Now, sometimes they'll do a historically underserved fund pool. So all those people that are categorized as historically underserved will be competing amongst themselves. Or it's an open application where they're all competitive.
All right, I appreciate it.
Sure. So when we're looking at not just urban farmers, but just across USDA to support farming, our farm bills have come a long way. The services that we provide are broad. what we're hoping to do and looking at with urban agriculture is how can we utilize the authorities across USDA to support our farmers. So when an urban producer comes into an office and they typically just look at these conservation practices, how can we now expand and offer resources to the many different agencies of USDA? There's about 17 agencies. So for example, if you just look through here, you can see like, well, I'll just look at, say, production. So under production is the NRCS, where you might get your high tunnel. But also, if you look down in here, there are things like the organic cost share program under production. So that's a fee that will be paid to farmers to help them offset the costs associated with paying for the organic certifications. And that can be quite costly. So now they went from a 75% cost share down to a 50% cost share. So it's even more enticing for farmers to look at the organic program. But oftentimes what we're seeing is that urban farmers and others, there's value added things that can be done. So turning your tomatoes into tomato sauce. So as I look across these lists of grants, there are value added producer grants that would help farmers increase or scale up their businesses appropriately. And if you're interested in any of the different types of programs that are listed here, I'd be able to put you in touch with a grants management specialist. So I just want to jump back here to the technical and financial assistance again of NRCS. So there are many different programs, and these are all hot links. So when I send the presentation, you'll be able to go to them. Our typical workhorse program is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and that typically covers most of the practices that I mentioned, as well as things like pollinator habitats in this program. What I didn't put in here is the easement program, and NRCS does offer a variety of conservation easements that can help where there's either something like a wetland that needs to be preserved or restored, or more importantly, oftentimes urban farms have development pressure, and those programs could help a farmer stay on their land, and the development pressure is taken off of that, but it has to stay in open space in perpetuity. So bringing up the Farm Services Agency, that's our sibling agency. And in order to work with the NRCS, the Farm Service Agency takes care of the NRCS's eligibility requirements. But the Farm Service Agency also offers microloans, which are up to $50,000. And they're really great because they can be used for things like cold storage facilities. They could be used for equipment loans. Oftentimes, some farmers may not have all the money to buy a high tunnel, even though it's cost shared by NRCS. They can take out a loan from the FSA to cover some of those costs while they're constructing their high tunnel as well. So looking at scaling up, many different urban farmers are looking to unique and different ways to make money. Things like high value crops like mushrooms have become very, very popular. They don't take up too much space. And they're a great offering in terms of providing seasonal crops as well. So these are just some other policy examples down here that I put, kind of just mixed a presentation, a few slides from a presentation here that I just realized. But some of the things urban farmers do struggle with is different types of policies and municipal laws that can be challenging. Getting on to my favorite topic is the Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. And there are 4 tenets of the office, and one is a federal advisory committee. There's competitive grants. There are pilot county committees, which are a way for the public to have input on our programs, as well as community compost and food waste reduction pilot projects, which are only to municipalities, but really a great way to support urban farms with the natural resources of compost that they need oftentimes. So how am I doing on time, Andy? I'll get a time check.
Oh, about 7 minutes.
Okay, great. So this federal advisory committee right now, there is recommendations to the secretary on these 12 members. It was done through a federal register, a public process, all confidential. So we're hoping to hear who our 12 members will be. And those members represent a broad range of technical, nonprofits, business acumen, supply chain experience that are going to help guide our USDA Office of Urban Agriculture into the future. In every field office of the Farm Service Agency, there's something called the County Committee. And the county committees are farmers, a group of farmers that are nominated by their peers, and they help determine how FSA and NRCS administer their programs moving forward. So they've typically been in rural areas, but with the new Farm Bill, we're piloting these in urban areas. So in the past, sometimes these rural county committees could be very insular, and the focus of these pilot committees is to be something dynamic and more than just sort of looking at the few programs that USDA offers in these field offices. But what about all across USDA? How do we have participation from members of Food Nutrition Service or the Ag Marketing Service again, or maybe Agricultural Research Service that does things like controlled environmental agriculture? So these are really dynamic, and right now there's 11, but I believe that more will be coming on in the near future. On to the fun stuff, the compost and community compost and food waste reduction and urban agriculture and innovative production grants. So these pilot cooperative agreements in these communities, they're only eligible to cities, towns, governments, Native American tribes, and special districts. So we're seeing a lot of really great innovations come in how communities are instituting new policies as well as programs to help people reduce their food waste, some by how it's being stored and making good purchasing decisions, as well as converting food waste into a reusable, renewable resource for urban farms and an economic stream potentially. The competitive grants, there are two sections of the competitive grants, and one is for planning, and we really encourage planning projects to get successful community successfully applying for these grants. We do know that there's a lot of food policy plans out there. Sometimes there's farmland protection plans, but what about urban conservation plans, urban community plans that look at where the inventory is for land, how people could farm on it, and what's suitable, and what are the other resources needed along the food supply chain within the urban areas, especially in disadvantaged neighborhoods. And then the implementation projects, they are looking at focusing on urban and suburban areas where access to fresh food is limited or unavailable. And the eligible applicants in this category typically are experienced and have shovel-ready projects with a plan in place. So we always get a question, well, why are there no farms located? Why can't businesses be an eligible applicant? Well, the Farm Bill did not put that in there. However, nonprofit organizations, units of local government, so not states, tribal governments, and schools K through 12 are eligible. Well, what I think the intent was with this nonprofit section is that they could subgrant to other urban farmers in that process. And this is just kind of a repeat, but the cool thing is that this is one of the only places within USDA where we offer funding for things like rooftops, outdoor vertical production, green walls, and the high-tech vertical farm technology, such as hydroponics, aeroponics, and aquaponics. So I'm really excited that those are going to be coming on, hopefully in the near future, and we'll see these projects from our 2020 and then our 2021 applicants that we should be announcing soon. And that's what I have.
All right, well, thank you so much. And if you don't mind, maybe we'll see if there's a question or two. Again, feel free to unmute yourselves.
Hello. Question. So when you said that these are some of the projects that are coming soon, like the vertical gardens. Is that a project that somebody won an award for and that we will be able to see their urban farm as a vertical garden?
So yes, so the applications that are funded, we do supply information on the project summaries. And the intent is that we will highlight them as projects that people can look at as models. So that's an opportunity as well. Is that something that you're interested in? Like, is that an area of interest? Is the vertical farms and aponics?
So I'm definitely interested in the vertical gardening
Okay.
as a supplement to the urban farm gardening because of the amount of space that it takes up. It takes up less space. So absolutely, thank you.
Great. Thank you for the feedback.
I have a question. So I am trying to apply for some grant funding in the with the urban farming, and I'm wondering, do you guys help with like putting your business plan together for this grant? I'm actually looking at the racial and equity and justice grant, and I'm wondering, do you guys provide help in putting a project or a plan together?
Yeah, unfortunately, the employees of USDA aren't able to assist in that type of activity. It is a common question that we do get. My recommendations to people, and I don't know if you have an extension service in your community, but typically cooperative extension agents are very crafty with pulling together these types of grant applications. So that's potentially something that I would recommend. And then if you wanted to maybe put your email in the chat, I could communicate with you and see if there is like maybe another local nonprofit or organization in your community. I could do some outreach to see if there's someone that could provide that assistance. The challenge for us as, especially now with that particular funding authority being out and available, is we have to make sure that any information we provide on guidance is being offered to everybody that's applying to the program.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I would just add too, that is something you can also reach out to us at ATRA for. We may refer you to a cooperative extension if it's a question we can't answer. Getting some feedback. Or I see someone put in the chat SCORE, and there's also small business development centers as well. So yeah, lots of resources either through Joseph or your cooperative extension office or calling through ATRA. We can not only assist you, but also get you in touch with some local resources, as Joseph mentioned. All right, well, there's a question about sharing your presentation, Joseph, which I think you said was okay. So
Yep.
we will make sure to get that and put it in the teachable folder for session 2 for tonight. And on that note, if you do have any other questions, Joseph's contact information is also in the folder for contact information for presenters for the whole course. And we could also probably put it in the chat here as well. But Joseph and Raphael, I just want to thank you so much for your time this evening and for sharing all about the great resources USDA offers, particularly to urban farmers and veterans. And we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. And Ricky, if you wanted to put your email into the chat, I'll see if I can get an answer for you too on the 10-year.
All right, well, we are going to transition now over to Seth Wilner. And Seth has put a link in the chat I see, which I'll let you explain, Seth, related to helping with the business plan. But yeah, we are going to transition now to Seth, who's going to sort of guide us on the sort of ag business management side of things, and he's got some activities for us as well for this evening. So without further ado, welcome Seth, and thanks so much for joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure. Just some words before we get started. Andy, thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you. You're a person that has great passion for farming and you walk the talk. And I really appreciate that. You're from the heart person and have a great mind. And I also say for all of you that NCAT is a wonderful organization. I've worked with them over the years and do turn to them for a variety of resources, information, help, assistance, trainings, top-notch, super professional crew. And I want to stress that they do practical work, which is just excellent. So almost all their programs are just spot on. I shouldn't say almost, all their programs are spot on in terms of practical application. And then I too want to thank and express my appreciation for all your services and the sacrifices you've made. It sincerely is an honor to be teaching you tonight. So appreciate being here. You can follow up with me for more help if you want afterwards. There's no way in an hour that you're going to learn and really like build the skills. So view this really as building your awareness as to ways of going about doing things, and absolutely contact your local extension services, NCAT, and whatnot. And then those USDA programs, that was a kind of a quick overview, but they help so many farmers help fund the infrastructure for their operations, high tunnels, irrigation equipment, conservation planning, so many different things. So just do take advantage of that. I put Ag Plan into the chat. It's an online business planning tool put out by the Center for Farm Financial Management. It leads you through step-by-step of the business planning elements. It gives you examples, but what is even better is it lets you email your draft business plan to anyone you want. You can email it to other farmers. You can email it to this group. You can email it to Andy. You can say, hey, can you give me comments on it, to whomever you want to work with? And they could say, hey, flesh out this more, or, looks good, or whatnot. So I really like Ag Plan because it really helps walk you through. Then the Center for Farm Financial Management also has a national contract for a library of resources. So if you have a question, likely they have a resource. They're just a really super good, good library, good resource. All right, so I am going to bring my presentation up and share my screen and giddy up. Feel free to stop anytime you want and ask questions. I can't monitor the chat and teach, but Andy will. So what am I going to put together in an hour and a half to really help empower you? So I'm trying to help you figure out how you want to organize your data so that you actually can create a business plan and actually monitor for farm financial health, to really know, is your business making you money? So that's what we're going to try and do tonight. The work that you did last week with Andy is going to be huge. A farm has to know what it's managing toward. You have to know what the life you want on your farm is, or that farm will own you and you won't have a good quality of life. You work 7 days a week, 13 hours a day, if not more, and come in as an absentee partner, an absentee parent, and you'll be like, what is going on? But if you define, here's what I'm going to do, and this is where my farm is going to go, that's really going to help you take control of it. You're going to have questions of how big of a scale should your farm be at? Should you get employees? Do you have volunteers or not? And if you're a for-profit farm, you can't really have volunteers. What markets do you go into? Should you buy equipment? Should you take loans out? You're going to have people pushing things at you, grants, loans, all these things. It's going to be your farm goal. It's going to be that value-based goal that you craft with your family and your decision makers that is going to be the backbone of that. That's going to guide you through that. So can't stress enough, first know what you're managing towards, and then this financial aspect is going to be a way of getting you there, but don't only manage for profit, because it's just not going to give you the life you want. So I want today to share with you what information that will help you analyze your farm financial health if you can keep records. So even if you don't know how to use the records, if you can keep data, there's so many people out there that can come and help you. We go to work and help farms and the data is not there. That's hard sledding. I actually came to find out that no one even uses the saying hard sledding, and no one even has any idea what the heck it means, but it's I don't know. You get the gist of it. All right, so then hopefully through this, you'll be able to say, okay, this is the records I want to keep, and be able to start collecting that, and then really look at creating the finances towards your financial plan. Okay, I'm going to roll a poll out. In theory, I can do this. I didn't make this poll up. Carlos did. Ode to Carlos, and I'm going to launch this. So I'm going to ask this question for a reason, but do check all that applies if you have your computers on. Which do you feel is the most important for your own farm that you want to collect? One is knowing which markets are most profitable. Another is which enterprises are most profitable, what your biggest expenses are, what your net profit is, your net worth, and then how much it costs you to produce something. All right. So knowing my net worth had the least amount of folks, 4 out of 17. I'm going to say that knowing your net worth year in and year out is going to be like knowing your soil health year in and year out. So everyone does a soil test every couple, 3 years. And people know their pH, they know their organic matter content, often the nutrient levels. And I'll say that if you know your net worth, that's going to tell you, is your farm heading in a positive financial direction or not? And it's not ever going to be a linear, progression upward. Rarely is it. It's going to oscillate, but you want to know what the trajectory you're on. Are you increasing your assets, or are you increasing your debt and your liabilities? So which way are you going in time? Plus, when things are going really well and you stop paying attention, market shifts happen. And you're like, uh-oh, what's going on? So that is a key thing. And it's going to be your balance sheet that it's going to tell you that. You're going to need a balance sheet for a business plan. We'll talk about that a little later, but just to touch on that. Knowing how much it costs me to produce something is key. And so many of you checked it. Because to go and sell something below the cost of production, by my way of thinking, you got to burn that money and watch Oprah and just hang out, save your bodies, save your time, have a good time. So if you don't know what it costs, you can't choose a price. So how do people choose prices? Well, what my neighbors choose, or what I think I can get. But then you can lose one heck of a lot of money. And we see that with sweet corn so frequently. That's just a dog of a crop for many farms. Knowing which markets are more profitable, that's going to help you spend your time. Should I be going to the farmer's market? Should I have a community supported agriculture? Should I sell at a farm stand? Should I sell at the grocery store? Should I go wholesale? Should I sell to restaurants? All these are choices. So what's profitable? And if you keep records by market channel, that's going to help you there. So that's why I brought that up. Obviously, the enterprises, home run there. Your biggest expenses, many of you check that. When you're looking through how you're going to make more money, don't nickel and dime yourself with silliness. It's your big expenses, right? It's going to be labor, fuel, your major supplies. Those are the things that are going to make a difference if you can cut or find alternatives. Knowing your net profit, because depending on your business structure, that's going to be likely what you're going to be able to put in your pocket. So that is, I should have shared the results. My bad. I thought I was sharing. Carlos, where were you when I needed you? So those are the results there. I thought you were all seeing that, so I'll let you see a gander of what everyone thought. The point to this also is, what did you pick? Because that's going to drive how you keep records and how you organize your data. So if it's important to you, you'll want to keep a mental note. Okay, we want to collect data that lets us do this. So even if you know nothing more from tonight, but you say, this is how I want to be able to do these things. Write that down and then go to NCAC, go to Extension, go to FSA, go to NRCS and say, help me do this, because we will help you do this. We'll hold your hand and we'll walk you through it. So just tell us what you want. And this is going to kind of help us know how to help you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Again, chime in anytime you want with questions. It's your presentation, people. Here is that. All right. So if you think of organizing your data, this lady, Julia Schenk, has really helped me get this clear in my mind. Think about it as a bunch of buckets, and you're going to be putting different data in different buckets. And so even if it's just dumping your receipts in different buckets, or it's taking a spreadsheet and making different tabs for different buckets, identify the buckets you want. And so that's going to help you organize what financial data you create. And it's not going to be a one size fits all. So don't let anyone tell you this is the only way to do it. If it helps to just buy into what someone is offering you and just doing it their way, that's fine. Get out of the gate and then modify it as you want. But there is no one right way. So that's key to recognize right there. These are some ideas for buckets. You have this thing, direct operating expenses. We'll define that later. And this is administration overhead. Another bucket is all the assets. These are the equipment, the infrastructure, the things people owe to me, money that they owe me. This is going to come up on your balance sheet. It's also what you owe people, loans, debts, credit cards, things like that. Another bucket might be, as we pointed out, market channel. We want a bucket that has the expenses and the revenues from market channels. Other buckets you might choose, production costs, payroll. Want to know how much labor is costing me. All things payroll. Repairs and maintenance, what it costs to lease land, rent land, own land, property taxes, those type of things. So here's some ways, some things that you might consider with buckets, what you'd put in. So these production costs, seeds and packaging, payroll, salaries, wages, workers' compensation, all the taxes you got to pay for your employees if you have them. Office supplies under administration overhead, these insurances, liability insurance. Market channels, it might be you want to break those out and put in and divide up into farmers markets, farm stands, wholesale. And even if you just do these bullet points here and say, help me create a record keeping system, we can. In your assets and your balance sheet, you're going to have your bank account balances, inventory and equipment, money people owe you, which is accounts receivable, money you owe vendors, accounts payable, these loans, these debts, these credit cards. All right, a lot of words, a lot of concepts. Keep calm, stay organized, and just methodically push through. All right. If you had your buckets organized in some of the ways above, this is what a profit and loss statement could look like for your farm. You could get your net income because you know all your revenues, you know them by markets right here. These were the restaurants all aggregated together. These were your farm stand. This was all your wholesale. These were all your CSA shares. These were these direct operating expenses. This is what the farmers markets cost me, and crop supplies and so on and so forth. This is all my payroll. So this is what it cost me in labor a year. This is all my overhead. So what that cost. This too is overhead if it's not directed towards a specific, direct enterprise. This is what it cost me in land leases. So these are all your operating expenses, and then we look at subtracting some of these, the taxes, the interest. But this tells you after all that, I put $6,700 in my pocket-ish, and those figures are not made up. They're taken from a farm. So you could see the low margins, which is why we really got to focus on finances. We're looking anywhere on the farms that I work with, 7 to 20% profit margins. And the 20% are like the A class. And so often we use a 10% profit margin where I am. So urban agriculture, I haven't studied. So those figures don't apply to an urban setting. I do not know that because I live and only really work with rural farmers. So I don't know if those are higher or lower, but margins are going to be thin. So knowing your numbers is going to be huge. But you can see if you just organized your chart of accounts, you say, well, I want to look at was farmers markets profitable? I can look at, if I broke out, I know my revenue, I know some expenses. I may want to break out my labor by farmers markets. So I could break that out by market channel there. So it's just an idea that I want to seed your mind for ways of treating data. All right, too complicated? Might be like, whoa, we have an answer for you. You could just do direct and indirect costs. You could just do costs of producing your goods and services. And those are things like seeds, plants, fertilizer, bins, boxes. And you can just say, I'm just going to separate that from my overhead. My interest, my repairs, the taxes, the insurance, the office supplies, the salaried labor, any photocopier, and we won't even deal with depreciation. We can touch on that later. So if we just use those 2 buckets, right? 2 buckets, this is what we could get. This is just a pictorial of that. Seeds, fertilizer, netting is a direct cost to a blueberry operation. This is an example of an indirect cost. You could see that things like an irrigation system that applies to multiple crops, covers a field, office supplies, a tractor, multiple crops. So direct and indirect, boom. Look what we can get. We have our revenues, we subtract the direct costs, now we get a gross profit. We then can subtract our overhead costs, and now we have this operating income. We can subtract these business taxes and any interest we had in loans and depreciation. Now we know our net income. Gross profit tells us, did we generate enough money to cover just what it costs to produce cows, pork, tomatoes, tomato paste, whatever it's going to be, right? So did it just cover those direct costs? If it didn't, then we know we really have to make some quick adjustments pretty fast. So revenues minus direct costs. Your receipts are going to give you your direct costs. You would have had to pay for your seeds, your fertilizer, your animal feed, things to that effect. Your direct costs are also going to help you examine what your biggest expenses are. So now you know where you want to cut things. And then your overhead, if you are going to also give that the biggest expenses there too. And your net income are going to say, here's the return to my labor and management. Those are just 2 buckets, right? Direct costs and overhead are going to give you all this information to really assess, how am I doing in my business? So one of the things we really stress is being able to at least do a gross profit, at least say revenues minus direct costs. Because if you're not even covering your direct costs and you know you have your overhead to cover, then you're in a hole digging deeper. And then knowing your overhead costs, often that's going to be associated with debt. So when people are like, boy, you're doing really well, you should go to the next level, scale up. Really look, you're saddled with that overhead, no matter what. You're going to have to pay those loans, those fixed costs. So that's a word of caution there. So going back to those 2 buckets, again, these direct costs, I just wanted to repeat this slide so you could say, okay, I can make a spreadsheet, or I can have buy an accounting book that I write in pencil or pen, these costs here, and I can just separate out my overhead as different costs, and I can create a record keeping system. So I'd like to do a little less talking now and give you some time to think about this. So I'd like you to take a minute and think about the categories you just saw. You saw a bunch of categories before you, and I can whip through those in a minute. The production costs, the direct cost, so on and so forth. Think about what you selected for your poll answers regarding the information that was important to your farm. And just try and sketch out right now. And if I saw people that were there in couples and maybe you're there in families, like just have a quick chat for a minute or two. What are the buckets we really want? Because that's going to really lead us into the next one. And then maybe in a small group, just share, this is what I came up with. So I'm going to whip through the beginning just to give you the buckets. These are some buckets. Other buckets. And I'm going to now stop talking and give you a minute to think about that. And then we'll put you into the breakout groups. All right. So that was figuring out what buckets you had. So now we're going to use the chat, and Andy can read out, or folks can see. But now the next thing is, not to break into a large group, I want you to take a minute, and you might get a bonus minute if the couples are all still talking and everything, to think about what data collection methods you might successfully be able to use. And so what have you used in the past to collect financial data? If you don't have a farm yet, what might you use? What are you thinking? So how am I going to track this stuff? One thing certainly is a credit card statement, but I don't know that you're going to buy everything on credit card, but what might you use? And then put it in the chat what you think might be successful, or anything you've heard about in conferences or anywhere that you've gone that might be something that a method that might work for you. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm going to give you a minute again to think about, how am I actually going to collect this data? I got those buckets. How am I going to put anything in them?
All right, Seth, you want me to start reading some?
Yeah,
All right, we have saving receipts.
absolutely. So touching on that one, you could save the paper copy. There's also something that, and take notes on any of this that resonates with you. So there are all these software apps for your cell phone that you take a photo of your receipt and then it categorizes them. It's way cool. Businesses use it. So like folks take their business expenses and whatnot. They're free, they're downloadable. So that's one way of saving receipts right to your phone and having an electronic copy of that. Also, the paper receipt's great, and you could save that too. Go.
Going to farmers market and looking at competition and seeing different price points from different farmers and vendors.
So that's going to be a real positive to know where you stand. And then if you are higher than the other price points, you're going to have to figure out some way of marketing that as to why they should buy it. But please don't lower your, if you don't know what it costs to produce your product, don't lower it to sell. Because you're just effectively then back to the Oprah situation. Might as well stay home. But if you know what your cost of production is and you can lower your price to match theirs and you're still making money, hot dog. But if not, don't do it. Next, please.
All right, we got the old standby of QuickBooks.
QuickBooks is a good tool. You still need the data to populate it, but yes, it's a great tool, and there's so much help out there on chart of accounts, which is a way of organizing your data for our farms.
This one I really like, and I think we're going to hear more on it next week related to sort of the legal aspects, but having a separate bank account for the business, for the farm.
Absolutely huge. So separating your personal accounts from your business accounts is huge to protect your personal assets. Absolutely huge. Insurance is going to be your number one protector, but then your business structure is going to really help in a big way. Also, if you are losing money and you get called in an audit and they're like, so is this really just a hobby and that you're just expensing? If you're like, you say, no, I function as a business, they're going to say, prove it. You have a business name, you have a business a bank account. It's separate. You're not writing personal checks from your business bank account. You're not covering business expenses from your personal account, that demonstrates you're trying to operate as a business. So it is a really good practice. Plus, everything in there is going to be a business expense or a business revenue. So bingo, that's a home run. Bonus points to Abby on that one.
We have a few folks saying start with Excel. One, because they're comfortable with it. That's the program they currently know.
So I love that because I'm going to give you 2 Excel templates to leave with. So bingo. It's going to be bonus point to Walter on that too. So double bonus points.
We have a few folks saying use debit cards. Someone said use debit cards, Cassandra, instead of cash, but I'm actually thinking instead of credit.
Yeah, well, a debit card will have a recording, particularly if it's to what we just said was the business bank account. If it's cash, it's gone, right? But like you wouldn't really be able to track it, but a debit card would let you. Key with debit cards so check with your bank if you're going to use a debit card. It's my understanding, but I don't know if this is factually correct, but that if your account gets hacked, credit cards protect you and debit cards don't, but double check that. I also have to check on one thing. So Abby, I gave you the bonus point, but I don't know if that was a joint you and your husband, or if that was you and your husband or your husband. Okay, so Abby does get the point. Phew, I just had to double check that, didn't want to be, perfect. All right, back to debit cards. Okay, yeah.
And I will second that. I was told when we opened up our farm business account that to use credit cards for those protection services over debit. Ricky says credit cards will also help establish credit for your business.
True story.
I think we covered them all.
Love it, love it. And Ray affirmed it, so that's cool. Okay, so coming up with that method is gonna be pretty key. And so really recommend that you give thought to that. So I'm going to share my screen, but what is next? Okay, share my screen again. Ba-boom. Hey, give a thumbs up, which I can't see because I'm looking at my screen, if you're having a good time. Andy, if they're not having a good time, we gotta retool this. 50-50 at least. Uh-oh. You should see the look on Andy's face. I'm never going to be asked back. All right, there we
Maybe
go.
next time we'll do it within a happy hour.
There we go, exactly. All right, so here's some tools. I'm going to give you some practical tools you can walk away with soon. Okay, second poll. Uh-oh, yay, yes. All right, here we're getting into it now. Woohoo. Poll number 2. All right, please check all that apply. Your family has a budget. You know how much money your family needs to live on per year. You know how much money the farm needs to provide to meet your family expenses. So you know what your family needs to live on. Maybe you have other income coming in, stock portfolio, whatever have it, oil rights, whatever it may be. And you would like a family budget tool. Yay, yay, yay. I can't believe it that many of you have a family budget. Usually it's like 10%. This is so awesome.
Just a reminder, Seth, to share the results.
Thank you. We only have 14 people, so we're not even half of you. Come on, lucky 7. Okay, one more person chime in and we'll end this polling. One more who hasn't. Margot, you could save them. Yes, we got one more. All right, share the results. You got Margot to thank probably. All right, so about half of you had a family budget. About 40% know how much your family needs to live on per year, and then know what the farm needs to provide in the family budget. So this one here, that's going to be huge for your farm planning. How much is it that farm needs to give you? Because that's going to determine your scale. That's going to give you a goal to set. And that might be more each year. Hopefully in the first 3 years, you don't need much from your farm. So the farm can get its legs underneath it. You can reinvest and capitalize your farm and whatnot. But at least have a trajectory and know that. So that is excellent. I'm going to stop sharing. Well done with that. Your family has a budget. Okay. So now I'm going to share again. Soon we're going to give you the tool. All right. So these are the steps of the tool that I'm about to share. And I broke it down into as few steps as I could, so that I could just help you walk through this tool and design it. First, you're going to determine what the annual gross revenues or gross income the farm makes. And so if you just know it's a total figure of $56,492, that's fine. If you can break it out and allocate it by your market channels, if that's what's important to you, or by your products or services, even better. And you'll see this in the spreadsheet we're about to give you. And then that part really determine what the annual profit you need from your farm. And to make it easy, we're just going to say how much money needs to leave that farm and go into your pocket. We're not going to say recapitalizing and reinvesting and whatnot. We're just going to say, can this farm pay for its expenses and give me money to live off of, for the simple get-go. And then we're going to try and just break out all your expenses into the very buckets you all just discussed. So that's what we're going to try and do. And now we're going to talk about this tool. And I'm going to go from one sharing to another. Stop. First, I'm going to give you the family budget tool. Okay. Family budget tool.
Seth, we have one question. I think you're going right there with the family budget tool, which is how can we know how much we'll need if we don't know what we're going to grow and how much to sell for?
Yes, that is your family budget. That is, so if it costs my wife and I $71,000 to live off of. We have a child with a disability. We have costs associated with that, but that's what it costs us to live off of. So if our salaries bring in $55,000, I need $16,000 that the farm has to produce, has to give me in net income that I have to be able to take out of the farm and put into my pockets. And so that's one way that you could look at it. What does it cost me to live off of? And so if you look at this tool here, this is, and I don't know if you can't see it, Andy, let me know, I can make things bigger. This is the family budget tool that I made up for our family. I'm going to put in revenues. I have my salary, I have my wife's salary. And so those are the things that are fixed that I can count on. And I could put in a fixed amount each month for that. Maybe it's going to be the same every month. It is for me and my wife because we're salaried. Maybe if we're farming or whatnot, it's going to differ each month. And that's going to add all of that up. I'm going to show you finalized, but not for the family budget. I'm going to get another income. So we have a small farmette, and I say farmette because we net between $1,800 and $3,000 a year, depending. So nothing big, but so I have farm sales that comes in. Wife serves on the school board. She got income for that, select board income. But so these are other things that come in as maybe we'll stay on it, maybe we won't, maybe we don't know that it'll produce steady. So we separate those. So I now know my revenues. Another question?
No, can we just get a thumbs up from folks if you're able to see this, or does Seth need to make it larger? Everyone good?
If you could make it a little larger, that'd be awesome.
There we go.
That looks good. Thanks.
Excellent.
Oh,
I'm
it jumped
coming.
back.
Every time I switch, I'll do it.
Okay.
If I don't, remind me. Okay, so we have children. So I didn't populate this. It's on a different spreadsheet. So my bad, but we put all their expenses in: children's clothing, braces, children's recreation, summer camp, you name the children's expenses. If I want to add more line items, I'm going to hit this and I can insert more line items. This is going to add all the way across and all the way down. Okay, here's auto. So we put in cost of cars, car payments, maintenance, repairs, insurance, registration, inspection, oil changes, gasoline we could put in, things to that effect. And you populate this as you want. You'll get this tool, but by all means populate this as you want. And then we have all these household mortgage, property taxes. We put retirement in here, home maintenance, life insurance. We put a family garden in there, home insurance, groceries, medical copays, electric, oil, pets, medical insurance, cable and internet, garbage, wood. And then we have personal. So my dad taught me never make a budget that you don't put in money that you could blow and not account for. So if I want to buy $50 worth of beer, that's my right to do it. And if my wife wants to buy $50 worth of makeup or worth of magazines or whatever it is, like, no question, it's allocated. $51 worth of beer, now we got a problem. But 50, it's all kosher. All right, gifts we put in, Christmas, birthday, you name it. Clothes, makeup. We put vacation and travel. I could have put that in household, put it there. Oh, here's wine and beer. Actually, it's its own line item. Should have taken that out to be more extension appropriate. Dates we put in, eating out, cell phones, so that stuff. So what that will do is it'll add up all your revenues. It'll total your income. It'll total your expenses, and it'll tell you in this planning phase whether you're positive or negative. So the beauty of this is if you're negative, you go back and you're like, can't really afford that car payment. So I guess I'm going to be driving the Subaru for a little longer or whatever have you, or can't really afford, whatever, that level of groceries or whatnot. So it'll add all that up for you and let you know. So that's one way of determining a family budget lickety-splickety. What this also does is you put in your plan. If you so wanted to go to your QuickBooks and or whatever you use, your bank account, and say, here's actually what I spent in the month of January and whatever, like, it'll do the math for you. So I chose one I didn't have anything for car payments. Say that I put in $300. What the heck just happened? Sorry. Okay. Oh, because number lock is not on. $300, and I actually spent, $450. Then, yeah, it's gonna. Okay, it's not totaling that. Why it's not working that way, I'm not sure, but guess I shouldn't have practiced that in front of you. But it will subtract that and show you the negative. So and then in the annual plan, did that show up there? Yes, here it shows up here on the main sheet. Here's what I put that in there, 300, 450 I spent, I'm 150 in the hole. So I know for that month in that category, I'm in the hole. And then it'll add up all the way down for that month. Then I'm 150 down for that month entirely for the year. Here's the year. So it'll add it across for the month. So I don't want to confuse you with the minutia, and I can teach you how to do this certainly with more time, but it's a really good tool. If you did nothing else, you'll see it's all the equations are in it that you could fill in your own tabs. You can name these tabs anything you want by renaming them. And then you can go up here also if you wanted and rename that up here. And so then this will look like you want to look here. Okay, so that was the holistic management spreadsheet for that. That's your family budget. I'm now going to go to the farm budget. So I'm going to quickly show you this. Annual plan. And I'm going to show you for a farm that we did. And who funded that program? NCAT. Woohoo! All right. So this now, you're going to put your planned revenues in. Here's an example. CSA, restaurants, for salad greens, restaurants for pork, things to that effect. Here's miscellaneous income. Now here it might be that you're both working on the farm and someone does some consulting off farm. And so since this is a farm plan, your miscellaneous income is your off farm revenue. So this is a really good conversation to have, and it's a key point. So if my wife works off farm and I'm on the farm busting it, but barely breaking even, and she says, look, we can't afford a family vacation. We can't afford a family vacation because you are insist on farming for your vocation and it doesn't make any money. I'm not working to support your farm. That's not what I'm about. So we could have that conversation. Well, how much can we put towards this hopefully mutual dream of this farm? And she might say, okay, so we could put 10K of my earnings towards this, or we can put, 1,000 a month towards this, or whatever. But you have that conversation. If there's off-farm income, how much of that can go to the farm? Because this is now, we switched gears to a farm budget. Did that make sense? Andy, you're not filling me with great confidence.
I see lots of heads shaking yes.
Perfect. Okay. Here's the planned profit. So here's what we're saying. In each month of the year, for the total that we want for the year, how much do we want that farm to give us? So how much do we have to subtract as an expense that's coming out of that farm? So that's that idea of the planned profit. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and give you a bonus round. Okay, boom. Whoops a daisy. All right. Everyone in waiting room, what? Everyone in meeting, okay. Income minus expenses equals profit. That makes sense to people? Talk to me about this. What does that do just by changing that equation? You can just unmute yourself. I can't hear Abby, but I can see them talking. Anyone want to unmute themselves? What does that do for us now?
Changes our focus from expenses being the thing to deduct from the income versus the profit. It just switches the perspective.
Switches the perspective. It also does something really useful for us too. And that is, it gives us the top amount of expenses we can have. It caps our expenses. It defines the maximum amount of expenses I can have because I'm projecting my income, I'm subtracting my profit. So then that's the max I have. I've got to function in that dollar amount for that expenses then. So I project 50K coming in. I need to take 20K in my pocket. I have 30K to spend. However I want to spend it, I spend it. But the moment I go above 30K, I'm not taking the profit I need. And if I really need it for my family budget, then I do one of two things. I lower my family budget or I lower my expenses. I guess I actually could increase my revenues somehow, but that's always harder said than done. So just thinking about it in those terms become huge because now I can function in. People are like, well, those are my expenses. What am I going to do? It's farming. What are you going to do? Define how much you have to spend and allocate that and function in that mode and be like, I am about profit. And so that, and that's a way of also saying, I'm not just going to take what I get. So I don't know.
That's outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, that was the bonus round. Now I'm going back to sharing. Okay, I'm going to show you a completed financial plan, but I guess I have to bring that up. Okay, share. Okay, so we did this for a project that NCAT sponsored. So these are, I took them from an aggregate of farms I work with, but they're real numbers. So the farms were about 1.2 million. This farm was an aggregate. So you can see that the buckets we used, this is our revenue. It could have just been all revenue, right? Still would have worked. We broke it out into straw sales, farm stand sales. So we really tried to break it out really via either market channels or enterprises. And we went to a combination, right? And so then we also had miscellaneous income. They had rental income, and then we had agricultural program payments. So if you get an EQIP grant, which is a wonderful, wonderful program, or if you get a variety of other programs, that's money. It's money coming in. So, but it's not money that you would count on as your planned income, right? But you put it somewhere. You got 11K funded a high tunnel.
Seth, can you remember to make the font larger?
Yes,
you.
yes. I appreciate it. Do remind me. Okay, so this is where Logan and Mary said, this is what we need. They needed 60K a year to live off of. This is what their son Pat needed, 60K a year. That's what Matt needed. And the whole problem we were solving for this farm was, could we support 3 families on that income? And then this was reinvestment in the farm. So we said in the easy example, we wouldn't go for that, but we wanted to actually be able to reinvest in equipment in the farm. And they put about $20,000 a year into equipment, new machinery, new vehicles, things that went into what is called a pack wash shed to do produce. Those were figures that they got. So as I mentioned, these bottom sheets, you can make whatever you want. There is a process called holistic financial planning, which is a specific way of financial planning. And so it really says, okay, not only am I capping my expenses, but if I'm really going to cap my expenses, then I can't treat all expenses as equal. I better differentiate my expenses as some way more important than others. So these were the top priority expenses. These were the things that they wanted to invest in their farm to solve problems and to advance their farm in the direction that their farm goal wanted them to. So these were the costs of those. These were what were inescapable expenses. Again, you don't have to have this bucket system. This is specific to holistic financial planning. You have a loan, you got to pay it. You have taxes, you got to pay them. Interest expenses, you're paying it. Workman's comp, you're paying it. So then they decided they weren't going to keep overhead as a separate category. So they embedded it in the other ones. So then all these were maintenance expenses. All these are where we focus on cutting when we need to cut. These are the things that were their lowest priority. They weren't obliged to do it for the inescapable. They didn't sign a contract for debt. They didn't have to pay taxes on it. They weren't the high priority. So these things could be areas that they could cut. And so you get at the game of cutting when your expenses are limited. It came out to this great annual plan. And as I told you, it sums up at the bottom, and their total expenses exceeded their total income, and they had to cut $37,432. So then we work with farms, and you work with various extension, NCAP, others to help you and say, where am I going to cut that money? But because it's in a spreadsheet, you don't have to go back and add everything up. And because they divided their buckets this way, we knew that this was the category that they were going to cut. So how do you lower utilities? Can you go to LED lights? Can you go to solar? Can you use some of those great USDA funds for rural energy and offset things to that effect? Can you lower your supplies? You have $200,000 in supplies. Here's another tip for your buckets. When we try and analyze farm books, we get this ubiquitous supplies, and it's a whopping number. And we're like, well, what were those? I don't know. Can't cut what you don't know. And so to the extent that you could delineate your supplies, that you can identify what they are, baling twine, I don't know, twine to trellis tomatoes, clips, whatever have you. Could they lower their chemical costs? Things to that effect. Here are the easiest way that we cut the $37,000 deficit. It was on pre-buy. Anything you see in December on a farm that is of this magnitude are often ways that you're offsetting your tax liability, so you pre-buy. So if we could lower pre-buys, then that was one of the strategies we used on this farm. So often when you pre-buy in December for the next year, you do get a lower rate. You do get to claim it as an expense. So if you actually made money, you can offset tax liability. But many of us believe that the game of offsetting tax liability actually bites you in the backside in the end. Like when you are all about not paying taxes, so you're going to expense yourself into debt, and that doesn't actually give you the nimbleness you need as a farm. All right. How about I stop sharing and I go to questions now? What questions do you have? So it might be hard to think about questions in this big group unless we're seeing them. So I see one question. December, March, they didn't have any income. No, they're a vegetable farm. And so that was one way of, so that's one of the challenges of vegetable farming or produce farming. It's cash flow. So if I don't sell anything until April, but I have expenses coming in the December, or if they say the January through February through March range, I gotta have money to be able to afford to pay that. There's a concept called working capital, which says you want at least 1/3 to 40% of your total yearly expenses in reserve. That's one way of doing it. There's operational loans that range from 3 to 5% interest. That's another way of doing it. Some people do CSA shares, so you actually get money in the off season. So that's another way of doing it. So there's ways of bringing capital in, but that is a challenge. Some folks say, well, I'm going to sell Christmas trees. I'm going to do something just break even for cash flow. So here's where we go to what's the quality of life you want, though. So you're going to be toast come December. You're just cooked. And so do you want downtime? And you're going to gear back up. And if you start onions, you're gearing back up in February. If you forego the onions, at least you buy yourself a little more time. But so do you want breathable time to have some downtime, family time? And that's going to be a tension there. But good observation, Ricky. Bonus point to you for that. Other questions? Can I make the font larger? Yes. All right. So I got another one for you. I'm going to share my screen on this. When is the fun going to end, Andy? All right. So a balance sheet you're going to need, as we spoke about, for a business plan. So balance sheets can get complicated. They don't have to be, and somebody certainly can help you do a balance sheet. But this is a very simple net worth statement that Holistic Management International made up. And so we kind of made it up together. So it's just so simple that I gave it to you as an example. You can Google and get a template for a balance sheet pretty darn easily though. But if you just at least had your cash and checking, total amount, any notes that you wanted to put in there, and all this is coming your way. So any savings or investments, money that people owe you. And that's where QuickBooks is wonderful because it's going to be able to let you just say, who owes me what money? And so that's a real positive. The value of all your equipment. There's going to be a couple ways of doing it. We'll touch on that shortly. If you just ask yourself, I'm going to have a big sale today. I'm selling out. I'm going to Aruba. I'm living the good life. How much can I get for everything I have on this farm? And you just say, I can get $1,500 for the walk behind. Is that reasonable, Andy? Yeah.
It is.
Sweet. Good guess. And I can get $50 for this, and I can get $38 for the Felco, and I can get $1,600 for my 25-horse tractor with a mower body. Great. Get a total figure there. You'll really want to have more precise notes when you can get them, more precise breakdown, but we're just trying to at least get you started here. What's the value of your real estate and buildings? Even if I had to use the taxable value, like if you were going to sell your farm, you'd have to get an ag appraisal. But even if you're just going to say, oh, I'm going to go to my taxes and at least get an idea. Or there's some, I don't know what the website is that everyone's using to get housing values right now. You plug your address in and it gives you a housing value, but there are websites that give you that. Value of your livestock, turn to you know, one of your extension folks or whatever. What your inventory of product is. Zillow, yes. Ricky, 3 bonus points for that. The value of your supplies. What are your clips and what other things worth? Maybe it's 0, right? Maybe they're all used, but who knows? Anything else? And just add your total assets up. And what money do you owe that you haven't yet paid? So Andy still owes me, what? $100 for non-stinging bees, but he's still waiting to breed those. One day they're going to come. And so then you have a loan that you owe the bank of whomever, another loan here. That's it. This is what you owe in unpaid taxes. So it has to be unpaid taxes, right? So it's not like, so maybe you're paid up. You don't owe anything. We'll leave accrued expenses, but expenses you owe the date you're going to liquidate your farm. So you have your total liabilities. So all you have to do is take your total assets, subtract your total liabilities, and that's your net worth for a very simplistic way of doing it. Bingo. And that at least lets you say, okay, that's your net worth. It gives your lender an ability to at least say, okay, if you can prove this to me in some way, shape, or form, we now have an ability to make a loan for you. So Farm Service Agency is wonderful. They will work with you. They will take a sheet like this and say, okay, let's tease this out a little further for the purpose of us lending to you, but we're getting there. So if you could have populated that spreadsheet that I just gave you, well, actually, I'm gonna switch modes. Those are the sheets that I have to share with you. I'm gonna go back into the PowerPoint and we're gonna finish up lickety-splickety. Yeah, I got 7 more slides-ish. Any questions to date? No, so either you all know this or you are in oblivion. This is a tough subject after dinner, but hang in there, people. We're almost there. The pain is almost over. Come on, you. There you go. So you're going to need 3 financial statements for your business plan. That income statement, the balance sheet, and a cash flow budget. That template that I gave you, that was the Excel spreadsheet, can easily serve as both an income statement and a cash flow budget. You populate that, you have both in one. And that net worth statement, that can serve as your balance sheet. For beginning farmers looking to advance in these USDA programs, that's enough information at least to get you through the door, and then they could say, okay, I need a little more here, I need a little more there, or this is darn good enough. And you bring those numbers to an extension office or NCAT or SCORE or Small Business Development Association, and they'll be able to get you across the finish line there for your business plan. So just going through these, the balance sheets. It's really showing what you owe, what you own, and what you owe. And so here's what you have, here's what you owe, and then here's what you own. Then here's what your net worth is, your owner's equity. So that net worth statement should give you that. You'll be able to see that this is pretty darn similar to the categories there. Your income statement. So the balance sheet actually, though, one key factor is that is at a specific point in time. So we do them effectively twice. We do them January 1, and we'd like to do them December 31st. It is a photograph in time. It is going to change constantly, right? Your cash in your bank account is going to change. Your inventory is going to change. So they like to see beginning year and ending year balance sheets. So you're going to do them twice. So all good, but a lot to process. Well, yep, absolutely. This is drinking from a fire hose. This was the assignment I was given by Andy. So, but again, if you did nothing but raise your awareness, this is what I have to do. Now just say, hey, go approach all those ag service providers, all those ag organizations, and say, help me do this. I get what I need to do. I'm going to start to populate these tools I was given. Where I get stuck, I'm going to write questions down, and the help will be on the way. Like, that is the good thing about this. So if you don't have any revenue yet, and you're not in business yet, then you're going to at least say, here's what I think I can sell. here's what I believe my expenses are going to be. I'm going to go through the Johnny's catalog and they're going to be my seeds, or I'm going to go through whatever catalog, or I'm going to have these cows and this is how much milk I'm going to be able to produce and sell at this amount per hundredweight. Your job is harder trying to create a business plan from nothing, but you're going to try and say, this is what I want to do. This is the revenue I think I can get. And these are the expenses I think I'm going to incur. And so, and then there's, I think NCAT even has how to write a business plan, how to get started, but an ag plan certainly has that. There's so much out there for beginning farmers that there's a lot of resources we could send your way. Here, this income statement. So we said the balance sheet was a point in time. The income statement actually is looking at a year, an annual cycle of your business is what they want to know. What have you generated for income and expenses over an annual cycle? And so that's how that is embedded in the spreadsheet. I gave you this example before. Here it is again. You have the slide deck to go through that. Cash flow, beginning cash on hand, revenues that come in, all that was in the spreadsheet. And then money that you're going to pay. So notice that you had, when cash was leaving your farm, you were paying $600 in, February for, fertilizer, or actually you bought it in December in a pre-buy, but whatever. You had the months that money was leaving your farm. And that's when Ricky noticed, hey, you got no money coming in. You have no inflows December through March. That's how he was able to notice that, because we know when money's coming in, we know when money's leaving. And so we also know that on a monthly basis, are we going to have a hole? And if we have a hole, we're going to have to figure out how to fill that. And so that is what I have for you tonight. And it was drinking from a fire hose. And you could ignore almost anything except that which resonated to you. You could say, all I'm going to do is define my buckets, and I'm going to go get help creating, a way of collecting the data. Or I'm going to define my buckets, and I'm going to try and really fill out those templates, even if it's a wish list, even if it's like, okay, I got my family budget, and I know how much the farm needs to provide for me. And then here's how I'm going to make my money. I'm going to have that green vertical garden, and this is what I'm going to grow. And I'm going to call someone up, or I'm going to Google, what are my yield for 38 tomatoes? And it's going to say 10 pounds of saleable fruit per plant. And you're going to say, all right, I think I can sell that for $3 a pound. And this is what it's going to cost me. And you're going to put all that into that spreadsheet. And that's going to tell you, oh, did that add up, or was I selling below my cost of production? So that's going to do some of that work for you on your cost of production. So it gets a little more complex, but it can be that simple. And I like what Robert said. Start with what you want to grow. Try and figure out what yields will be from that. Take yields and say what you think you can get in your market for that. And then what is it going to cost you to grow that, to produce that? What is the feed it's going to cost you? What is the fertilizer? What are the equipment you're going to need? Whatever. And then start slow. So Andy, tie this up for us. How do we take the shock and awe out? It's crazy.
It is. So a couple comments here. One is all of the spreadsheets that Seth has mentioned are in the Teachable folder. So you do have access to all the spreadsheets that he showed. And Seth, I'm assuming we'll also have your presentation. I think some folks are saying they need to look it over a few times to sort of take it in from the fire hose.
I think I sent you that, or I think, Carlos, do you have that?
You have it. I can put it up on Teachable.
Yeah.
A couple other thoughts too. One is, I think Robin's looking to confirm, but Seth, you showed quite a few slides from Julia Shanks.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to mention Julia Shanks is a consultant, someone Seth and I have worked with, and she's written a book called The Farmer's Office, which is a really great book. If you're interested in purchasing it, I would just say hold off. Maybe we'll have an answer here shortly, but when we see each other in Baltimore, we do have several books that each of you will walk away with, have your own little library. And I believe that is one of the books we've included for this training. So I just want.
There's another resource you should be aware of as well. Every state, at least in the Northeast, I know of the Northeast, I don't know across the country, but almost, I know 50 out of 56 states and territories received $500,000 each, starting September 1, under the Farmer Rancher Stress Assistance Network. Those monies are being used to effectively pay for mental health and business planning. Any source of stress for a farmer, those monies are being used to help support through education or for direct services. So in the Northeast, where I am, every state but West Virginia, Delaware, I think it was New Jersey. Those were the 3 states that didn't apply for it, but every other state applied and received it. It's run through the Departments of Ag. So you can either check with the Department of Ag or your cooperative extension. So in New Hampshire, we're putting about $200,000 in direct money to farmers to get business assistance help, to get mental health therapy, to get legal assistance with business plans. And so similarly in Maine, and there's a lot of support for underserved populations. Like it's a real big focus. So you also have that ability. It's a 12-year grant, a 12-month grant. It's a 1-year no cost extension. So do approach people for it in the next 12 months. But that's another resource that is available too.
And I believe, Seth, the University of Tennessee has funding for FARSAN within that region. So West Virginia, Maryland. At least they did. I'm not sure if they went through the state by state funding as well, but they do have the FARSAN.
Oh, it was DC, I think, that didn't apply, but it was, I think New Jersey did. Just check in. It's the FARSAN State Department of Ag grant, and that stands for Farmer Rancher Stress Assistance Network.
And I could also mention that within the FARSAN network are cohorts made up of different what folks want to lead, whether it's financial, whether it's a BIPOC farming group. There is a separate cohort for veterans. So you can definitely look into that as well. And I believe as a cohort member, you also get a stipend for serving in that capacity. But there is one specifically for veterans, at least in the Northeast. But you can check with the other regions as well.
Andy?
Yes, Seth.
Who was your friend that was a really cool guy that worked with NCAT and he wrote a whole farm planning book out of Oregon? That's another really good book.
Yeah.
Put Andy on the spot.
Gary Stevenson.
Yeah, Margot from the depths of wherever. Woohoo! Yes. So that's another really good book that will walk you through step by step.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention too, in terms of record keeping, and Seth, you asked this question of, where do folks start? There's a lot of programs out there, particularly designed for farm record keeping. So I would just caution you as you do your research. I would say there's a lot of different costs associated with them, as well as they're designed for different scales of production. So even though, for example, some popular ones may say, designed for the small farm, that small farm still may be not really designed for an urban farm, and they're still thinking 500,000 in gross sales. So you just really have to look at the particulars of how that software is designed and what the associated costs are and how that relates to an expense for your farm. I know there's just a lot out there that may not have, that are just too expensive for some small farms and urban farms to afford. But there are a lot of programs out there, and we can share some of those with you. I think there's even a chart somewhere that sort of shows the pros and cons of different ones out there. A lot of folks use one called Ag Squared. Tend is another one. And I think within COVID too, a lot of them have moved more into the online sales components as well. So just depending on the capacity of what you want this program to do, just requires some research and some time, but there's just a lot out there.
The other thing I'll also suggest is, so extension, that's where I work, so I know that game. We're ground up, so we want to hear needs. If you're like, look, we want a veteran farm focus in our state, or we want an urban agriculture focus in our state, or we want research. If you can tell me the margins, profit margins of the other farms, please can we do research on profit margins of these urban operations, or of these vertical gardens or container operations or whatnot. So you could drive the research boat too. That will help you as well.
All right, so we are right on time. We just have a few minutes. Maybe if there's any other last minute questions for Seth and or USDA folks, if they're still on. Trying to look if Joseph's still on.
I'm going to defer to Margot because she's on fire tonight.
And as a reminder, this session was recorded, so it'll also be in the folder for tonight.
Carlos, a thanks to you as well for all the technology. You take stress off when we can just be like, we have Carlos, sweet.
Well, Seth, I want to thank you so much for all the great information you provided tonight. And as I mentioned, with all of our presenters, their contact information is in the folder as well. So feel free to reach out to Seth if you have any specific questions for him. And just a couple of housekeeping things real quickly. One is the plan is to still be in person in Baltimore. We're still evaluating, taking things day by day. And Ray, Emily, Margot, Rob, and I are going to be meeting tomorrow to sort of just regroup and see, where things are at in Baltimore and understand the safety protocols. But as of this moment, we are still planning to be in person in Baltimore. But we will keep you posted, which also relates to a lot of the materials we'll have available for you, including your t-shirt, as well as some resources and a small library. But if we're not in person, we'll still make sure you receive those materials, because we really, what I feel is picked those that are really the best for helping you initiate an urban farm and help manage towards your goals. And unless there's no other questions, I just want to remind folks we do have a survey for tonight. Again, just a very simple 2-question survey that's really important for us to help understand what your needs are and how we're doing. So please take a moment to fill that out. I see Robin has put it in the chat. We'll also follow up with an email in case you don't get to it tonight, but your input is really valuable, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions. And
I think Cassandra
again,
has a
I
question.
think Cassandra has her hand up, Andy.
oh, go ahead.
Hi, okay, so as a research topic, if the resource does not already exist, is there a way we can find out which states, counties, and cities are zoned to support urban farms?
Sure, there are some resources out there for that, but if you would want to just reach out to me, or I could take a note, but I can look into it, and I think it would be great to share that with the whole group. So I can definitely
Absolutely.
follow up and put that in the Teachable, but also follow up to make sure that you all know that information's there. So just to be clear, though, you're looking to see what particular information's out there per certain cities in terms of zoning and regulations.
You have
Miss
another
Mel,
hand up.
oh, sorry, Miss Mel, I think.
Yeah, well, I know in Chicago here, I think we can, well, at least here we can find ours under city ordinances and city zonings. I just kind of like type in farms and just see which areas are zoned for that, because I know within the city of Chicago alone, there are over 800 city farms and gardens alone. A couple of years ago, there were only like over 600 when I did the Windy City Harvest Urban Agriculture Program, and that was like 3 years ago. Now there are over 800. So you could probably check your check into your local your city ordinances there they should have that information. And then here too, we have the AUA advocates for urban agriculture. If you even have an organization like that there, they might be able to help you too. So, you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would add too, to see if your city has a food policy council. Food policy councils have been very active in helping create policies, zoning policies, and sales policies around urban agriculture. And there's some pretty amazing case studies out there as well, Kansas City being one, Cleveland another. But where there's certain zoning restrictions that date back a long time, where it may say you can produce a certain amount of crops, but you can't produce them here, maybe only in your backyard, but also you can't allow sales on your property or things like that. So that's where the food policy councils really come in to help making sure that all the dots connect, that yes, you allow urban agriculture, but you should also allow sales then for, for commercial businesses. So definitely check to see if they're available, but I will make sure to include some information.
Signage is a problem in that venue too sometimes. Farm Bureau might also be able to help you with policy there.
What was that? Can you repeat that, please?
Farm Bureau is another organization. NOFA is another organization. Small and beginning farmers might also, but Farm Bureau plays a lot in policy. And so I know here we face zoning issues a lot. Signage was the other topic that I mentioned, where you can produce food, but you can't have a sign within X amount of feet of the road or whatever have you. And so those restrictions kind of can hurt you if they exist. But we're seeing a shift towards local farming in policy. And so depends where you're at, but it might be a good time if the policies work against you to have that change. So.
And you all will be introduced when we're hopefully in Baltimore to a few organizations. One is Seth mentioned NOFA, which is for the Northeast Organic Farming Association. For Maryland, Virginia area, there's CASA, the Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture. They also have a sort of a sister organization called Future Harvest, but they're really heavily involved for that area, as well as specifically for Baltimore. We're gonna hopefully see part of a farm that's tied to an overarching organization for urban agriculture called the Baltimore Farm Alliance, and that sort of represents many urban farms in Baltimore. But just again, another grassroots agency there to support urban agriculture and the needs of the farmers.
It's been my honor to teach with you all tonight. If you have any feedback to Andy that said, hey, if he focused on less or if he covered this instead, that would help me to be able to help other veterans too. And if there are high points, do point that out too. So, definitely looking to give my A game whenever I can. And so I can get with Andy and he can get me some of that feedback if you have any.
All right, well, once again, thank you so much, Seth. And just as a reminder to please fill out the survey, as Seth just mentioned how important it is to him as well. And also there is the Zoom link. We'll share again for Tuesday at 12 o'clock. We'll have office hours for an hour. And if you want to hang out for a few more hours, we can go right into happy hour. And on that note, next week's class, we have the legal presentation with our friend Rusty from the National Ag Law Center. And then we're also going to hear from our colleague Tammy Howard, who's going to give a presentation on marketing and branding your urban farm.
Yay.
So looking forward to seeing you all next week. And as always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if we can be of any assistance. And hope you all have a great night and a wonderful week. Look forward to seeing you next week.